The anniversary dinner sat untouched on the table, but Jennifer Walsh didn't even glance at the meal as she faced her husband of 8 years, Nathan Walsh, in their modest downtown apartment, telling him to pack his belongings and leave immediately because she'd accepted a proposal from his longtime business rival, Derek Thornton, who had just promised her the executive position she'd been desperately pursuing at Meridian Global Industries, a $50 billion conglomerate that dominated markets across 6 continents. Nathan stood there in his worn jacket and faded jeans, looking every bit the struggling consultant Jennifer had grown to resent. But what she didn't know was that the poor husband she was throwing out was actually the secret chairman of the very empire she'd spent 3 years trying to join, operating under a carefully constructed identity, while the world believed the reclusive founder had never married. Derek had been feeding Jennifer insider information for months, promising her a vice president role if she left Nathan and became his wife instead. But neither of them realized that every email, every stolen kiss, every whispered plan had been documented by security teams that reported directly to the man they were betraying. The divorce papers were already drawn up, Jennifer's bags were packed for Derek's penthouse, and she'd even invited Nathan's mother to witness his humiliation on what should have been their celebration, completely unaware that the signature she was demanding would trigger a sequence of events that would reshape her entire world. When Nathan finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost sad, asking her one last time if she was certain this was what she wanted. Jennifer laughed, actually laughed, calling him a failure who'd held her back from her true potential. But she didn't see the phone in his pocket recording every word, or the way his eyes had shifted from hurt to something colder, something calculating. What would Jennifer's face look like when Nathan revealed his true identity at Meridian's board meeting the following Monday? What would Derek feel when he discovered the rival he'd been sabotaging for years was actually the untouchable chairman who controlled his career, his reputation, and his future? What would Jennifer do when Nathan exercised his authority to buy out the marketing firm where she'd built her reputation, the company she'd sacrificed her marriage to advance within? And what would both of them say when they learned that Nathan's next moves would send not just their careers, but Jennifer's entire family, who had pushed her to leave him for a wealthier man, into legal consequences they never saw coming? The rain hammered against the windows of apartment 7B, but Jennifer Walsh barely heard it as she stared at her husband across their small living room, her fingers clutching the divorce papers that Derek had prepared 3 weeks ago. Nathan Walsh looked smaller somehow, diminished in his thrift store clothing and second-hand shoes, but that was exactly what she'd been seeing for the past 2 years. A man who couldn't provide, couldn't advance, couldn't give her the life she deserved. "I want you out tonight," Jennifer said, her voice steady despite the thunder that shook their building. "Derek is picking me up in 2 hours, but I need you gone before he arrives." Nathan didn't move from his position by the bookshelf, his hand resting on a leather-bound journal that had belonged to his father, but his eyes never left Jennifer's face. "Today is our anniversary, Jen. 8 years. Don't you remember?" "Don't you dare," Jennifer cut him off, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the papers. "Don't you dare try to guilt me with sentimentality when you've failed at every promise you made. But I'm done being poor, Nathan. I'm done wearing last season's clothes while my colleagues show up in designer everything. I'm done pretending your consulting business is anything but a joke." The consulting business had been Nathan's cover for 8 years, a small operation run from their apartment that generated just enough income to seem legitimate. But Jennifer had stopped believing in it after the first year when no major clients appeared, no breakthroughs materialized, and their bank account remained stubbornly modest. What she didn't know was that the consulting firm was a carefully constructed front, designed to hide the truth about Nathan's real role in the business world. a truth that would have changed everything about their relationship, but one that Nathan had kept buried for reasons even he sometimes questioned. Derek has offered me the executive vice president position at Meridian Global Industries, Jennifer continued, moving to the window where city lights glittered in the rain-soaked darkness. Do you understand what that means, Nathan? Meridian is a $50 billion empire, but you wouldn't know about real business, would you? They operate in 63 countries. They control markets worth trillions. And Derek, her voice softened when she said his name. Derek sees my potential in ways you never did. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, watching his wife transform before his eyes into someone he barely recognized. Derek Thornton had been circling Jennifer for 6 months, ever since she'd started working at Hartwell Marketing Solutions, the firm that handled several of Meridian's smaller accounts. But Nathan had known about Derek's interest long before Jennifer realized she was being pursued. The security reports that landed on Nathan's desk each morning had detailed every lunch, every accidental meeting, every carefully orchestrated encounter between Derek and Jennifer, but Nathan had chosen to wait to see if his wife would remain loyal, to discover if 8 years of marriage meant anything when tested against ambition and wealth. He'd failed that test, Nathan knew now, but the failure was Jennifer's, not his. Derek and I have been seeing each other, Jennifer admitted, turning back to face Nathan with her chin raised defiantly. For 3 months now, but don't look at me like I'm the villain here. You drove me to this, Nathan. Your poverty, your lack of ambition, your complete inability to be the man I needed. The words hit Nathan like physical blows, but years of board meetings and high-stakes negotiations had taught him to control his expression, to hide his emotions behind a mask of calm, to never reveal his hand until the perfect moment. He'd learned those skills from his father, Richard Walsh, who had built Meridian Global Industry from a single manufacturing plant into a worldwide empire, but who had also warned Nathan that wealth attracted the wrong kind of attention, the wrong kind of people, the wrong kind of love. Marry someone who loves you when you have nothing, Richard had told Nathan on his deathbed, his hand gripping his son's with surprising strength. Marry someone who doesn't know about Meridian, about the money, about the power, but when you find that person, never reveal the truth until you're absolutely certain they love you for who you are, not what you can provide. Nathan had followed that advice, but somewhere along the way, Jennifer had stopped loving even the modest version of him he'd presented to the world. I've already moved most of my things to Derek's penthouse, Jennifer said, glancing at her watch, a Cartier piece that Derek had given her last week, replacing the simple Timex Nathan had bought her for their 5th anniversary. Your mother is coming over in an hour to help you pack, but I wanted to tell you face to face that this marriage is over. Derek proposed last week and I said yes. Nathan felt something crack inside his chest, but his face remained impassive. You invited my mother to watch you humiliate me. She deserves to see what her son has become, Jennifer replied coldly. Maybe she can talk some sense into you about getting a real job, but I'm done playing house with a man who can't even afford to take me to a decent restaurant. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on Nathan. He could buy every restaurant in the city without making a dent in his personal accounts, but Jennifer would never know that. Not now, not after what she'd done. His mother, Patricia Walsh, had warned him about Jennifer from the beginning, sensing something calculating behind the sweet smiles and affectionate gestures. But Nathan had been convinced that love could overcome class differences, that honesty, or his version of it, would build a stronger foundation than wealth ever could. He'd been wrong, but his mother had been right. Sign the papers, Jennifer demanded, throwing them onto the coffee table between them. Derek's lawyer made it simple. You get nothing, I get nothing, but we both get our freedom. I assume even you can understand that much. Nathan walked slowly to the table, his movements deliberate, controlled, each step echoing in the small apartment that had been their home for 8 years. But he didn't pick up the pen Jennifer had placed so carefully beside the documents. Instead, he pulled out his phone, the latest model that had seemed extravagant when Jennifer questioned its purchase 6 months ago, but which she'd assumed he'd bought on credit like everything else about their life seemed to be built on debt and desperation. "Before I sign," Nathan said quietly, his thumb hovering over the screen, "I want to record your statement about why you're leaving, but I want to make sure I understand correctly. You're ending our marriage because I'm poor, because I lack ambition, and because Derek Thornton has offered you a better life." Jennifer's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but she nodded. "Yes, and I'm not ashamed of that. Women have the right to choose partners who can provide, but you never understood that, did you? You thought love was enough, that your pathetic attempts at being a good husband would somehow compensate for your complete failure as a provider." Nathan pressed record, but his hand was steady, even as his heart broke with each word Jennifer spoke. "I deserve more than this," Jennifer continued, warming to her subject, her voice rising with years of accumulated resentment. "I deserve the life Derek can give me. The penthouse apartment, the luxury cars, the vacations in Monaco and Bali, but you could never give me any of that. You're weak, Nathan. You're a failure. And honestly, I don't know why I wasted 8 years on someone so utterly beneath me." The recording captured every word, every inflection, every ounce of contempt that Jennifer had been hiding behind false smiles and dutiful wife performances, but Nathan's face never changed, never revealed the cold calculation that had replaced his earlier heartbreak. Derek Thornton had played this perfectly, Nathan had to admit, identifying Jennifer's weaknesses, exploiting her ambition, feeding her just enough insider information about Meridian to make her feel special, but not enough to reveal that the man she was divorcing controlled everything Derek pretended to offer. "Is there anything else you'd like to say?" Nathan asked, his voice still quiet, still controlled, but with an edge Jennifer had never heard before. "Yes," Jennifer said, emboldened by what she perceived as Nathan's weakness. "Your mother was right about one thing. You're exactly like your father, but not in the way she meant it. Your father was a nobody who died with nothing, and you're following the exact same path. At least Derek comes from money. At least Derek has connections. At least Derek can give me the life I was meant to have." Nathan stopped the recording, but his fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, sending the file to 3 different locations: his personal attorney, his head of security, and a folder marked Evidence Jennifer Walsh that already contained months of surveillance footage, financial records, and communications between Jennifer and Derek that would prove useful in the coming days. "I'll sign," Nathan said finally, picking up the pen, but his eyes met Jennifer's with an intensity that made her step back involuntarily. "But know this, Jen, you're making the biggest mistake of your life, and by the time you realize it, there won't be any way to undo what you've done." "Are you threatening me?" Jennifer demanded, but her voice wavered slightly. "I'm stating a fact," Nathan replied, signing each page with careful precision. "You're throwing away 8 years for a fantasy Derek has constructed, but you never asked yourself why a senior executive at Meridian would be interested in a mid-level marketing coordinator, did you? You never questioned why he pursued you so aggressively, or what he might want besides your company." Jennifer's face flushed with anger. "Derek loves me, but you wouldn't understand that, because you never loved me the way I deserved, Nathan. You never showed me off, never introduced me to important people, never made me feel valued." "I never made you feel valued," Nathan repeated slowly, each word weighted with meaning Jennifer couldn't comprehend. "That's an interesting perspective, but I suppose it depends on what you value, doesn't it? I valued loyalty. I valued character. I valued the woman I thought I married, but she seems to have disappeared somewhere along the way. Before Jennifer could respond, a knock at the door announced Patricia Walsh's arrival, but Nathan held up his hand to forestall Jennifer's movement toward it. "Let me get it," he said, walking to the door and opening it to reveal his mother, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of the world to be fooled by surface appearances. Patricia Walsh took in the scene immediately, her gaze moving from the divorce papers on the table to Jennifer's defiant posture by the window, but her expression remained neutral, carefully controlled in the way Nathan had learned from watching her navigate decades of his father's secret business dealings. She'd known the truth about Meridian from the beginning, had helped Richard build the empire while maintaining a public facade of middle-class normalcy, but she'd also watched Nathan struggle with the decision to hide his identity from his wife, warning him repeatedly that secrets always had consequences. "Jennifer," Patricia said coldly, removing her coat but not sitting down. "I understand you've made your choice, but I hope you understand. There are consequences for betrayal, especially betrayal on a day that should have been sacred." "Don't lecture me about sacred," Jennifer snapped. "You raised a son who can't even support his wife, but I'm sure you're proud of that, aren't you? Proud of his poverty, his failures, his complete lack of ambition?" Patricia's lips thinned, but Nathan touched her arm gently, silently, asking her to stay calm, to wait, to let events unfold as they needed to unfold. His mother had wanted him to reveal everything months ago, to confront Jennifer with proof of her affair and end the marriage on his terms. But Nathan had insisted on waiting, on giving Jennifer every opportunity to choose loyalty over ambition, love over wealth, character over comfort. She'd failed spectacularly, but Nathan had known she would. "The papers are signed," Nathan said, handing them to Jennifer. "You're free to go, but before you do, I have one question. What do you know about Derek Thornton's position at Meridian?" Jennifer blinked, confused by the sudden shift in topic. "He's a senior vice president in their acquisitions division. But why does that matter? Are you trying to make yourself feel better by diminishing his success?" "I'm trying to understand what Derek told you," Nathan replied patiently. "Did he mention who he reports to? Did he explain Meridian's corporate structure? Did he ever mention the chairman's name?" "The chairman is some reclusive billionaire named R.W.," Jennifer said dismissively. "Nobody knows anything about him except that he never appears in public, but Derek says he's old and probably senile, which is why executives like Derek really run the company. Why are you asking me this?" Nathan exchanged a glance with his mother, but Patricia's expression remained carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "And Derek promised you a position at Meridian if you married him." "An executive vice president role reporting directly to him," Jennifer confirmed, her voice gaining confidence as she discussed her future. "It's a position that comes with a 7-figure salary, stock options, and a corner office in Meridian Tower. But you wouldn't understand what that means because you've never worked anywhere that matters." "Interesting," Nathan murmured, pulling out his phone again. "And you're certain Derek has the authority to make that offer?" "Of course he does," Jennifer said impatiently, glancing at her watch again. "He's been with Meridian for 12 years, but why am I explaining this to you? Derek will be here any minute, and I want you gone before he arrives." Nathan nodded slowly, but his fingers were already moving across his phone screen, composing a message that would set in motion events Jennifer couldn't begin to imagine. "I'll be gone," he promised. "But first, there's something you should know about Derek Thornton, about Meridian Global Industries, and about the man you've been married to for 8 years." "I don't want to hear any more of your excuses," Jennifer said, moving toward the door. "Whatever conspiracy theories you've constructed to make yourself feel better about losing me, but I'm not interested." "This isn't a conspiracy theory," Nathan said quietly, holding up his phone so Jennifer could see the screen. "This is a direct message to James Peterson, the CEO of Meridian Global Industries, instructing him to prepare for an emergency board meeting Monday morning. But I suppose you're wondering why a poor, failed consultant would have James Peterson's private number." Jennifer froze, her hand on the doorknob, but her mind was already racing through possibilities, explanations, anything that would make sense of what Nathan was suggesting. "You're lying?" she said finally. "There's no way you know James Peterson, but nice try making up stories to get me to stay." Patricia Walsh laughed, actually laughed, a sound without humor but filled with bitter irony. "Jennifer, dear, my son isn't lying, but I don't expect you to believe that until you see the proof. Tell me, has Derek ever mentioned Nathan's father? Has he ever asked about Richard Walsh?" "Nathan said his father died in a factory accident when he was 20, Jennifer replied, confusion evident in her voice. "But what does that have to do with anything?" "My husband died of a heart attack in his office at Meridian Tower," Patricia corrected coldly. "His office on the 65th floor, the executive suite that Richard Walsh, founder and chairman of Meridian Global Industries, occupied for 43 years. But Nathan told you a different story because his father made him promise to find a wife who loved him for himself, not for his inheritance." The words hung in the air like grenades, but Jennifer's face showed only disbelief, denial, absolute refusal to accept what she was hearing. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Nathan is poor. We live in a tiny apartment. He drives a 10-year-old car. He shops at thrift stores. If he was the heir to a $50 billion fortune, but he wanted to know if you loved him or loved what he could provide," Nathan finished, his voice devoid of emotion. "And now I have my answer, Jen. You don't love me. You never loved me. You loved the idea of what Derek could give you, but you were never willing to work for it, to sacrifice for it, to build something real together." Jennifer's face had gone pale, but her eyes were wild, darting between Nathan and Patricia as if searching for evidence of deception, proof that this was an elaborate hoax, anything that would restore her certainty about the choices she'd made. "Prove it," she demanded. "If you're really the chairman of Meridian, but you can't be, this is insane." Nathan tapped his phone screen and Jennifer's own device buzzed in her purse, but when she pulled it out with shaking hands, she found an email from the official Meridian Global Industries domain, addressed to Jennifer Walsh from Chairman R.W. Richard Walsh's initials that Nathan had adopted to maintain his father's legacy while protecting his privacy. The email was brief, professional, devastating. "Ms. Walsh, this correspondence serves as formal notification that your employment application to Meridian Global Industries has been permanently declined. Furthermore, Mr. Derek Thornton's authority to make executive hiring decisions has been suspended pending investigation into unauthorized promises made using company resources for personal gain. Your former spouse, Nathan Richard Walsh, assumed operational control of Meridian Global Industries upon the death of his father, Richard Walsh, 8 years ago. The modest lifestyle he maintained during your marriage was a personal choice designed to identify genuine relationships versus opportunistic ones. All divorce proceedings will be handled by Meridian's legal department. You will be hearing from our attorneys within 24 hours regarding the terms of separation, but I should inform you that the apartment you shared, the car you drove, and several other assets you assumed were jointly owned are in fact solely owned by Mr. Walsh through subsidiary holdings. Regards, Nathan R. Walsh, Chairman, Meridian Global Industries. Jennifer's phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, but she didn't notice it fall, didn't hear it clatter against the hardwood floor, couldn't process anything except the slow-motion collapse of everything she'd believed about her life, her choices, her future. "No," she breathed. "No, this can't be real," but Derek said, "Derek promised." "Derek promised you things he had no authority to deliver," Nathan said flatly. "And in doing so, he violated his employment contract, his fiduciary duty to Meridian, and about 17 different corporate policies, but more importantly, he destroyed what might have been a legitimate career trajectory for you if you'd earned it honestly instead of through manipulation and affairs." Another knock at the door interrupted them, but this time Nathan didn't move to answer it, merely calling out, "It's open, but come in slowly." Derek Thornton entered the apartment with the confidence of a man who believed he'd won. His expensive suit perfectly tailored, his smile predatory, but his expression changed the moment he saw the scene before him. Jennifer's ashen face, Patricia's cold satisfaction, and Nathan's calm, controlled fury. "What's going on here?" Derek demanded. "Jennifer, are you ready to—" "Did you know?" Jennifer screamed, rounding on Derek with tears streaming down her face. "Did you know who Nathan really is? Did you know I was married to the chairman of Meridian?" Derek's face went through several rapid changes: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally terrible understanding. "That's not possible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The chairman is a recluse named ARW, but he never attends meetings, never shows his face, operates entirely through proxies." "I operate through my CEO and executive team because I value my privacy," Nathan interrupted. "But I attend every board meeting via secure video conference. I review every major decision, and I'm personally aware of every significant operation within my company, including your recent activities, Mr. Thornton." Derek's polished composure cracked, but he managed to keep his voice steady. "I don't know what Jennifer has told you, but whatever relationship she and I have is personal, not professional, and it has nothing to do with Meridian." "You used company resources to investigate my wife," Nathan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You accessed confidential HR files to confirm she had no prenuptial agreement. You promised her a position you had no authority to create, using inside information about restructuring plans you learned in executive briefings. But most importantly, you pursued a relationship with the chairman's wife, specifically to undermine me because you believed I'd never find out, that the reclusive RW would never notice one executive's personal indiscretions." The color drained from Derek's face. "You can't prove any of that. But even if you could, you're talking about a consensual relationship between adults." "I can prove all of it," Nathan said, holding up his phone where months of surveillance reports, emails, and recorded conversations were meticulously documented. "And the board will see everything at Monday's meeting, along with evidence of 17 other corporate policy violations you've committed in the past 3 years. But I've been waiting, Derek. Waiting to see how far you'd go, waiting to see if you'd stop before crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed." Derek's eyes darted to the door, calculating escape routes, possibilities for damage control, but Patricia Walsh had moved to block the exit, her expression making it clear that leaving wouldn't solve his problems. "This is insane," Derek said, attempting bravado. "You can't destroy my career over a personal dispute, but you're obviously not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking very clearly," Nathan replied. "Clearer than I have in years, actually. You see, Derek, I convinced myself that Jennifer's betrayal was about weakness, about temptation, about human fallibility, but then I started looking deeper. I started examining your pattern of behavior over the past 3 years, and I discovered something interesting." Nathan pulled up another file on his phone, but this one contained financial records, bank transfers, and communication logs that Derek had believed were secure, encrypted, impossible to trace. "You've been working with competitors," Nathan continued. "Specifically, you've been feeding information about Meridian's acquisition targets to Blackstone Industries, our primary rival. But you thought you were being clever about it, using Jennifer as an unwitting intermediary by having her marketing firm handle proposals that you'd already sabotaged from the inside. Jennifer gasped, understanding dawning in her horrified expression. "The Hartwell account," she whispered. "You said you were giving me insider tips to help my career, but you were using you to commit corporate espionage," Nathan confirmed. "Every proposal you submitted with Derek's insights actually contained strategic leaks that cost Meridian approximately $3 billion in lost acquisitions. But Derek was being paid handsomely by Blackstone for his information, weren't you, Mr. Thornton?" Derek's facade finally shattered completely. "You have no right to investigate me, but even if these accusations were true, which they're not, you're not going to destroy my life over this. I have connections. I have lawyers. You have nothing," Nathan said coldly. "By Monday morning, federal investigators will have all the evidence they need to bring charges against you for corporate espionage, securities fraud, and about a dozen other felonies, but you're right about one thing. I'm not going to destroy your life." Derek's face showed momentary hope, quickly extinguished by Nathan's next words. "You already destroyed it yourself, but what I'm going to do is make certain everyone knows exactly what you did. Your legal fees alone will bankrupt you. Your reputation will ensure you never work in any legitimate business again. And that penthouse apartment you were so proud of, it's owned by a Meridian subsidiary, and your lease was terminated approximately—" Nathan checked his watch. 15 minutes ago. Jennifer had collapsed onto the couch, her carefully constructed world disintegrating around her, but Nathan's attention remained focused on Derek. "Leave," Nathan commanded. "Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you from the building, but consider yourself fortunate that I'm not having you arrested tonight. That consideration ends Monday morning at 9 a.m. when the board meeting begins." Derek opened his mouth to argue, but something in Nathan's expression made him reconsider, and he turned instead to Jennifer with a desperate, pleading look. "Jennifer, come with me, but we can figure this out." "Get away from me," Jennifer sobbed. "You used me. You destroyed my marriage for nothing, but everything you promised was a lie." "Everything he promised was always going to be a lie," Nathan said quietly, "because he never had the authority to give you what you wanted, but more than that, he never intended to. You were a tool, Jennifer, a weapon to hurt me, and you played your part perfectly." Derek fled the apartment without another word, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. But Nathan knew his security team would ensure the former executive went nowhere except where he was directed. Patricia Walsh moved to her son's side, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, but her eyes remained fixed on Jennifer's devastated face. "What happens now?" Jennifer asked, her voice small, broken, nothing like the confident woman who had demanded a divorce an hour ago. "Are you going to have me arrested too? Are you going to destroy my career like you're destroying Derek's?" Nathan considered the question carefully, but his answer came from a place of cold calculation rather than residual affection. "That depends entirely on your family," he said finally. "Specifically, it depends on your father, your brother, and your uncle, the ones who've been pressuring you for 2 years to leave me for someone wealthier, someone more successful, someone who could advance their own business interests." Jennifer's eyes widened. "My family has nothing to do with this, but they were just worried about me." "Your family has everything to do with this," Nathan interrupted. "Your father, Michael Harrison, owns Harrison Development Corporation, which has been trying to secure contracts with Meridian for 5 years, but those bids have been consistently rejected due to quality concerns and financial irregularities. Your brother, James Harrison, works for a hedge fund that has been short-selling Meridian stock based on insider information they couldn't possibly have obtained legally. And your uncle, Robert Harrison, sits on the zoning board that coincidentally approved several permits for Blackstone Industries while denying similar applications from Meridian subsidiaries. The full scope of Nathan's knowledge hit Jennifer like a physical blow. "You investigated my entire family." "I investigated everyone connected to the woman I married," Nathan confirmed. "And what I found was a pattern of corruption, manipulation, and coordinated efforts to either infiltrate or undermine Meridian Global Industries, but I wasn't sure if you were an active participant or an unwitting pawn until tonight. Your recording makes it clear you acted primarily from personal ambition rather than family conspiracy, but your family's involvement remains problematic." Jennifer's hands were shaking violently now. "What are you going to do to them?" "What I'm going to do depends on what you do," Nathan replied. "Here are your options, Jennifer, but listen carefully because I'm only offering this choice once. You can cooperate with federal investigators, provide testimony about Derek's activities and your family's business practices, and potentially avoid criminal charges yourself. Or you can remain loyal to the people who used you and face consequences that will follow you for the rest of your life." "That's not a choice," Jennifer whispered. "You're blackmailing me, but I'm your wife." "You ended our marriage 2 hours ago," Nathan reminded her. "You recorded your contempt for me. You celebrated my perceived failures. You planned to humiliate me in front of my mother, but now you want to claim the protection of a relationship you destroyed. That's not how this works, Jennifer." Patricia Walsh spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice sharp as broken glass. "My son gave you 8 years of genuine affection, loyalty, and partnership, but you threw it away for promises that any reasonable person would have questioned. You never asked why a senior executive was interested in you. You never wondered why Derek knew so much about your husband's supposed failures. You never questioned whether the life you thought you deserved might come with costs you weren't willing to pay." "I loved him," Jennifer protested weakly. "In the beginning, I really loved Nathan, but things changed." "Things didn't change," Nathan said. "You did. I'm the same person I was on our wedding day. But somewhere along the way, you decided that love wasn't enough, that partnership wasn't valuable, that loyalty was optional when better opportunities appeared. You made those choices, Jennifer, but now you have to live with the consequences." His phone buzzed with an incoming message, but Nathan glanced at the screen and nodded in satisfaction. "My legal team has arrived," he said. "They're going to present you with several documents that outline your options moving forward, but I want you to understand something before you make any decisions. I'm not doing this out of revenge. I'm not trying to hurt you for the sake of causing pain. I am protecting Meridian, protecting the 43,000 employees who depend on this company for their livelihoods, and ensuring that people who betray my trust face appropriate consequences." 43,000 employees, Jennifer repeated dully. "You're responsible for 43,000 people, but I never knew. You never told me." "I never told you because I needed to know you loved me for who I am, not what I control," Nathan said. "My father warned me that wealth corrupts everything it touches, that people change when they know about money, that genuine relationships become impossible once the truth comes out. But I hoped, that if I found someone who loved me without the wealth, that love would survive even after the revelation." "I did love you," Jennifer insisted, tears streaming down her face. "I swear I loved you, but you have to understand how hard it was, watching my friends live these amazing lives while I was stuck in this tiny apartment, shopping at discount stores, never traveling, never experiencing the things I dreamed about." "You were never stuck," Nathan said quietly. "You were being tested, but so was I. I was testing whether you could be happy with enough instead of excess, whether you valued experiences we built together over experiences bought with money, whether your love was conditional on circumstances or grounded in something deeper. You failed that test, but I failed too, because I should have been honest from the beginning, instead of constructing an elaborate scenario that was unfair to both of us. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Nathan's legal team, 3 attorneys from Meridian's most powerful law firm, carrying briefcases filled with documents that would reshape Jennifer's entire future, but Nathan held up his hand before they could enter. "Give us 5 more minutes," he requested, and the attorneys nodded, retreating to the hallway. "I'm not going to pretend this doesn't hurt," Nathan said, finally allowing some emotion to show in his voice. "Watching you choose Derek over our marriage, hearing you describe me as a failure and a burden, realizing that 8 years meant so little that you could throw them away on your anniversary, it hurts more than I can articulate. But pain doesn't excuse inaction. It doesn't justify allowing corruption to continue. And it doesn't mean I'm going to let you or your family or Derek Thornton escape accountability." "What are you going to do to my family?" Jennifer asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan pulled up another file on his phone, but this one contained evidence that made Jennifer's earlier shock seem mild by comparison. "Your father's development company has been using substandard materials in construction projects for 3 years," Nathan said clinically. "Buildings that should last 50 years will be lucky to survive 15. Your brother's hedge fund has been conducting illegal short sales based on information they obtained through corporate espionage. And your uncle has been taking bribes from Blackstone Industry to manipulate zoning decisions in their favor. Combined, we're talking about multiple felonies, millions of dollars in damages, and potential prison sentences that could total decades." "You're going to send my family to prison," Jennifer said, the reality of her situation finally penetrating her shock. "Because I divorced you, but that's not justice. That's revenge." "I'm going to send your family to prison because they committed crimes," Nathan corrected. "Your divorce simply gave me the motivation to stop overlooking their activities in hopes of maintaining family harmony. But their guilt exists independent of your choices. The evidence I've collected will be turned over to appropriate authorities regardless of what you decide. But your cooperation could influence the severity of charges and potentially reduce sentences." Jennifer looked at Patricia Walsh with desperate, pleading eyes. "Please," she begged, "you're his mother, but you can talk to him, convince him not to do this." "My son is showing you more mercy than you deserve," Patricia replied coldly. "If this were up to me, I'd have exposed your family's corruption months ago and let them face maximum penalties, but Nathan insisted on waiting, on giving you chances to prove your loyalty, on hoping your love was genuine. You repaid his patience with betrayal, but he's still offering you options that most people in his position would never consider." The attorneys knocked again, and this time Nathan nodded for them to enter, but the 3 lawyers filled the small apartment with an air of professional authority that made Jennifer shrink into the couch cushions. The lead attorney, a woman named Catherine Morrison, who had represented Meridian for 20 years, placed several documents on the coffee table with clinical precision. "Ms. Walsh," Catherine began, her voice neutral but inflexible, "these documents outline 3 possible paths forward, but you need to choose one tonight. Path 1. You cooperate fully with federal investigators regarding Derek Thornton's activities, provide testimony about your family's business practices, and submit to a detailed financial audit to ensure you haven't personally benefited from illegal activities. In exchange, you'll receive immunity from prosecution, but you'll also be required to resign from your current position and sign agreements preventing you from working in any industry connected to Meridian's business operations." Jennifer stared at the first document, but her hands were shaking too badly to pick it up. "Path 2, Catherine continued, you refuse to cooperate, maintain your current position, and face criminal charges as a co-conspirator in Derek Thornton's espionage activities, but our evidence suggests your involvement was primarily negligent rather than intentional, so these charges might not result in conviction. However, civil litigation from Meridian regarding damages caused by information you transmitted through your marketing proposals would likely bankrupt you, but that would be your choice to make. There's a third path? Jennifer asked weakly. Path 3, Catherine said, her expression softening slightly, is something Mr. Walsh insisted we include despite my professional recommendation against it. You can continue your divorce proceedings as planned, accept a financial settlement far more generous than you're entitled to, and leave the state within 30 days. But in exchange, you agree to have no contact with Derek Thornton, cooperate minimally with investigators regarding your family's activities, and sign comprehensive, non-disclosure agreements about your marriage and everything you've learned tonight. That's the generous option? Jennifer said incredulously. That's the option where you get to walk away with your freedom and enough money to start over, Nathan said quietly. But it requires you to leave Chicago, cut all ties with people who used you, and never speak about Meridian or our marriage to anyone. You'd essentially be starting a new life, but it would be a life free from criminal liability and financial ruin. Jennifer looked between the three paths, her mind racing through implications and consequences she was barely equipped to process. But Nathan's next words stopped her deliberations cold. Before you decide, Nathan said, you should know that I'm buying Hartwell Marketing Solutions. You're what? Jennifer gasped. I'm purchasing your employer, Nathan explained. The acquisition will be finalized Monday afternoon, making me the owner of the company where you've worked for 3 years. But don't worry, if you choose Path 3, the generous settlement includes a severance package from Hartwell. If you choose Path 1, your resignation will be processed as part of your cooperation agreement. And if you choose Path 2, well, you'll be unemployed anyway once the criminal charges are filed. Why would you buy my company? Jennifer asked, genuine confusion cutting through her despair. Just to fire me, but that seems excessive even for revenge. I'm buying Hartwell because it's strategically valuable, Nathan said. The company has excellent client relationships, talented staff, and growth potential that's been hampered by poor management. But my investigation revealed that Hartwell's current owners have been deliberately sabotaging their own company to avoid paying employee bonuses and benefits. I'm buying it to protect the staff, improve operations, and integrate it properly into Meridian's marketing division. You're not buying it because of me, Jennifer said slowly, understanding dawning. I'm completely incidental to this acquisition, but I don't matter to you anymore, do I? You mattered very much until about 3 hours ago, Nathan replied honestly, but you made it clear that our marriage, our history, and any feelings we shared were less important than your ambition and Derek's promises. So no, Jennifer, you don't matter to my business decisions. You matter to my personal history. You matter as a lesson learned, but you don't matter to Meridian Global Industries, except as evidence in a corporate espionage investigation. The finality in Nathan's voice seemed to break something in Jennifer, but her tears had dried. Replaced by a hollow acceptance of reality she could no longer deny or escape. I'll take Path 3, she said quietly. I'll take the money, leave Chicago, and never speak about any of this. But I need to know, was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me, or was I just part of some elaborate test your father designed? Nathan was silent for a long moment, but when he spoke, his voice carried genuine pain beneath its controlled surface. I loved you, he said simply. I loved the woman I met at that coffee shop 8 years ago, who talked about changing the world through honest marketing. I loved the woman who stayed up all night helping me prepare presentations for clients who didn't exist. I loved the woman who said she'd rather have pizza and board games than fancy restaurants and expensive shows, but I don't know if that woman was ever real or if she was performing for an audience she thought couldn't afford better. She was real, Jennifer whispered. In the beginning, she was real, but somewhere along the way, you decided that being comfortable wasn't enough, Nathan finished. And maybe that's fair. Maybe I was wrong to hide my resources. Maybe I was wrong to test you instead of trusting you, but we'll never know what might have been different because we can't go back and replay the past with different choices. Jennifer signed the documents for Path 3 with shaking hands, each signature feeling like a final nail in the coffin of her marriage, her career, and her life in Chicago. But she paused before signing the last page. "What about my family?" she asked. "If I take this option and leave, but what happens to them?" "Your family will face legal consequences for their illegal activities," Nathan said. "That's not negotiable, Jennifer, but the severity of those consequences will depend partly on whether they cooperate with investigations and partly on the strength of evidence prosecutors can develop independently. Your testimony under Path 3 would be minimal, confirming facts that can be established through other means, so you won't be the primary witness against them." "They'll blame me anyway," Jennifer said bitterly. "My father will say I brought this on them by marrying you in the first place. But he never approved of you, Nathan. He said you'd never amount to anything." "Your father was wrong," Patricia Walsh interjected. "My son amounts to more than your father can comprehend. But that's always been the Harrison family's problem. You measure worth in surface appearances rather than substance. You see expensive clothes and assume competence. You see wealth and assume virtue. You see poverty and assume failure. But you never learn to look deeper, to value character over comfort, to recognize that the truly powerful rarely advertise their strength." Jennifer finished signing the documents, but her eyes remained fixed on Nathan's face, searching for some remnant of the man she'd married, some hint of the husband who used to hold her while she cried about difficult clients and professional setbacks. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry for not seeing what I had. I'm sorry for believing Derek's lies. I'm sorry for throwing away 8 years on a fantasy that was never going to be real." "I'm sorry too," Nathan said. "Sorry that I wasn't enough as I was. Sorry that my test failed us both. Sorry that we couldn't build something strong enough to survive ambition and temptation. But mostly I'm sorry that you'll never know the version of us that might have existed if you'd chosen differently tonight." Catherine Morrison collected the signed documents with professional efficiency, but her final words to Jennifer carried unexpected compassion. "The settlement will be in your account within 48 hours, she said. "It's enough to start over comfortably anywhere in the country except Chicago, but I'd recommend choosing a city where nobody knows your name or your history. Start fresh, make better choices, and maybe eventually you'll find someone who loves you the way Mr. Walsh loved you, completely, honestly, and without reservation." Jennifer left the apartment 30 minutes later, her belongings packed into suitcases that Nathan's staff had efficiently organized while the legal proceedings concluded, but she paused at the door for one final look at the man she'd underestimated so completely. "Will you ever forgive me?" she asked. "I don't know," Nathan answered honestly. "Ask me again in 10 years, but right now I need to rebuild my company, restore trust that was damaged by people I let too close, and figure out who I am without the lies I told to protect myself. Forgiveness might come eventually, but today I'm still processing betrayal." Jennifer nodded, understanding that some damage couldn't be repaired with apologies, but she left without saying goodbye, the click of the door closing echoing with finality through the apartment that had been their home. for 8 years. Patricia Walsh moved to her son's side, wrapping him in the kind of embrace only mothers can provide. But she didn't offer platitudes or false comfort. "You did the right thing," she said simply. "Not the easy thing, but the right thing. But now comes the harder part, rebuilding trust, restructuring Meridian to prevent future infiltration, and deciding whether you'll ever risk loving someone again." "Did Father ever regret his approach?" Nathan asked. "Did he ever wish he'd been honest with you from the beginning?" "Every day," Patricia admitted. "Your father loved that I married him when he had nothing, but he also knew that keeping secrets created distance between us that never fully closed. He wanted you to avoid his mistakes, but I think he overcorrected by encouraging you to hide everything, rather than finding a middle path where honesty and protection could coexist." Nathan's phone buzzed with updates from his security team. Derek had been detained at the airport, attempting to flee the country. Federal investigators had been briefed on the evidence, and Meridian's board was assembling for an emergency meeting that would reshape the company's leadership structure. But all of that seemed distant, abstract, less real than the empty apartment and the woman who had just walked out of his life. "What happens Monday?" Nathan asked. "Monday you stop hiding," Patricia said firmly. "Monday you step into your role publicly, attend the board meeting in person, and let the world know that Richard Walsh's son isn't a recluse or a mystery, but a real person who built on his father's legacy while maintaining his own identity. But more importantly, Monday you stop letting other people's judgment and ambition shape how you present yourself to the world." "The board won't like the publicity," Nathan warned. "The board works for you," Patricia reminded him. "And after we expose Derek's espionage and restructure departments, he compromised, but they'll be too busy managing the fallout to worry about whether you prefer privacy. Besides, maintaining anonymity clearly didn't protect you from people who wanted to exploit Meridian's perceived vulnerabilities." Nathan spent the weekend preparing for Monday's revelations, but he also spent hours reviewing security footage from his marriage, watching Jennifer's gradual transformation from genuine affection to calculating dissatisfaction, identifying the exact moments when Derek's influence began reshaping her perspective, recognizing patterns he should have seen earlier, but had missed because he wanted to believe in their love. On Sunday evening, Nathan's head of security delivered a final report that made everything else pale by comparison. "We found the source," Director Stevens said, his expression grim. "Derek wasn't working alone, and this wasn't just about corporate espionage, but there's a larger conspiracy we need to address immediately." "Show me," Nathan commanded. The evidence was damning, comprehensive, and terrifying. Derek had been recruited by Blackstone Industries 3 years ago specifically to identify and exploit weaknesses in Meridian's leadership structure. But the operation went beyond simple corporate competition. Blackstone's CEO, Victor Blackstone, had orchestrated attacks on multiple fronts, infiltrating Meridian's executive ranks through Derek, manipulating local government through Jennifer's uncle, undermining Meridian's reputation through Jennifer's brother's hedge fund activities, and creating structural failures in Meridian-contracted buildings through Jennifer's father's shoddy construction. "They were trying to destroy us," Nathan said quietly, understanding the full scope of what he'd narrowly avoided. "Not just compete with us or steal from us, but systematically dismantle everything my father built. But they used Jennifer as their primary entry point because they assumed I was weak, distracted, vulnerable." "They assumed wrong," Director Stevens said with grim satisfaction. "But sir, we need to go public with this. We need to file criminal charges against everyone involved. We need to expose Blackstone's strategy before they can execute similar operations against other companies." Monday morning arrived with clear skies and bitter cold, but Nathan Walsh entered Meridian Tower through the main entrance for the first time in 8 years, his face no longer hidden behind proxies and video conferences, but visible to every employee, every journalist, every curious observer who had spent years speculating about the mysterious chairman who built an empire from shadows. The board meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp, but Nathan's opening statement lasted less than 5 minutes. "My name is Nathan Richard Walsh. I am the son of Richard Walsh, founder of Meridian Global Industries. For 8 years, I have operated this company under the initials RW to maintain privacy and test personal relationships without the contaminating influence of wealth. But that approach failed to protect Meridian from systematic infiltration by Blackstone Industries through my personal life. Today, that changes. Today, we go public with everything: the espionage, the corruption, the coordinated attack on our company, and we ensure that Victor Blackstone and everyone who participated in his conspiracy faces appropriate legal consequences." The evidence Nathan presented over the next 3 hours was overwhelming, meticulously documented and devastating to Blackstone Industries, but it also exposed weaknesses in Meridian's security, gaps in their executive oversight, and vulnerabilities that Nathan's privacy had created. The board voted unanimously to implement sweeping reforms, but they also voted to support Nathan's decision to operate publicly going forward, recognizing that transparency might provide better protection than secrecy. By Monday afternoon, news of Nathan's identity and Blackstone's conspiracy dominated business headlines. But the story that captivated public attention wasn't corporate espionage. It was the personal narrative of a chairman who had hidden his identity from his wife, tested her loyalty, and watched his marriage collapse on their anniversary, when she chose his rival over the modest life they'd built together. Jennifer saw the news coverage from a hotel room in Seattle, where she'd relocated with her settlement money. But watching Nathan's face on television, no longer hidden, no longer obscure, fully revealed as one of the most powerful businessmen in America, made her collapse with grief for what she'd destroyed. Derek saw the coverage from a federal holding facility where he awaited trial on multiple charges that would likely result in decades in prison. But his primary emotion wasn't regret. It was fury that Nathan had outplayed him so completely. And Victor Blackstone saw the coverage from his office at Blackstone Industries headquarters, but his reaction was cold calculation as he assembled his own legal team to fight charges that threatened to dismantle his empire. The legal proceedings that followed would last 18 months, but the outcome was never seriously in doubt. Derek Thornton received a 15-year sentence for corporate espionage and securities fraud. Jennifer's father, brother, and uncle all faced various charges that resulted in prison sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years. But Jennifer's cooperation under her path, Thre agreement protected her from prosecution, while her testimony provided crucial corroborating evidence. Victor Blackstone fought the charges fiercely, but eventually accepted a plea deal that included a 10-year prison sentence and the dissolution of Blackstone Industries, its assets absorbed by competitors including Meridian. Nathan never spoke to Jennifer again after that anniversary night, but he received one letter from her approximately 6 months after she left Chicago, forwarded through attorneys to protect both parties' privacy. The letter was brief, handwritten, and heartbreakingly honest. "Nathan, I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I understand now what I threw away. Not the money or the power or the luxury I thought I wanted, but the genuine partnership we could have built if I'd valued substance over surface, character over comfort, love over ambition. I watch interviews where you talk about Meridian's future, and I see the man I married, thoughtful, principled, visionary. but I also see depths I never took time to discover because I was too busy measuring worth in dollars and status. You deserved better than I gave you, but I hope you eventually find someone who recognizes your value without needing lessons in humility to appreciate it. I'm building a new life here, working for a small nonprofit that helps women escape exploitative relationships. And the irony isn't lost on me that I'm now helping others avoid the mistakes I made. But maybe that's fitting. Maybe that's how I repay the generosity you showed me, even when I least deserved it. Thank you for letting me start over, but I'm sorry it cost you so much to teach me what I should have known all along. Jennifer Nathan read the letter once, filed it with other documents from their marriage, but never replied. Some endings didn't require final words. Some lessons didn't need acknowledgement, and some people needed to carry their consequences without the comfort of closure. 2 years after that anniversary night, Nathan met someone new, a woman who knew exactly who he was, worked in a completely different industry, and chose to date him despite, or perhaps because of, the public scrutiny that followed Meridian's chairman everywhere he went. But that's a different story, one built on honesty rather than deception, trust rather than testing, and mutual understanding that wealth was a tool rather than a measure of worth. Meridian Global Industries thrived under Nathan's public leadership, growing from a $50 billion conglomerate to an $80 billion empire. But Nathan himself learned to balance privacy with transparency, protection with openness, caution with trust. He never regretted revealing his identity to Jennifer that night, but he often wondered what might have been different if he'd been honest from the beginning, if he'd trusted her with truth instead of testing her with lies. The anniversary date still held significance for Nathan, not as a celebration but as a reminder that love built on false foundations couldn't survive the weight of truth, that partnerships required honesty even when honesty felt dangerous, and that the only way to truly know someone's character was to trust them with knowledge they could use to hurt you, then watch what choices they made with that power. Jennifer Walsh never remarried, building instead a successful career helping others recognize and escape manipulative relationships. But she kept that final letter from Nathan framed on her wall, not as a trophy or a memorial, but as a reminder of the woman she'd been, the mistakes she'd made, and the person she was determined never to become again. Derek Thornton served 12 years before being released on parole, but he never recovered his career, his reputation, or his sense of self-worth, spending the remainder of his life working menial jobs and avoiding the business world that had once defined his identity. And Victor Blackstone, the architect of the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed Meridian, spent his decade in prison writing a memoir that no publisher would touch because Nathan Walsh owned or controlled most of the major publishing houses that might have considered it. The Harrison family, Jennifer's father, brother, and uncle, served their sentences but emerged from prison to find their business licenses revoked, their professional reputations destroyed, and their social standing demolished by the weight of their convictions. But they never blamed Jennifer for their downfall, understanding that their illegal activities had created their own consequences, independent of her testimony. The story became legend in business schools, a cautionary tale about corporate espionage, but also about the dangers of deception in relationships, the importance of transparency in leadership, and the reality that testing people's loyalty often reveals more about the tester's insecurities than the tested person's character. Nathan Walsh eventually published his own account of the events, donating all proceeds to organizations that helped employees affected by corporate corruption. But he ended his book with a single paragraph that summarized everything he'd learned. I tested my wife's loyalty by hiding my wealth, but what I really tested was whether love built on limited information could survive complete revelation. It couldn't. Maybe no love can survive that kind of foundational dishonesty. Or maybe I simply chose the wrong person to test. But I learned that trust without risk isn't really trust. That love without honesty isn't really love. And that the only way to build something real is to be vulnerable enough to be hurt, then strong enough to survive if you are. Jennifer chose ambition over partnership, but I chose deception over transparency, and we both paid the price for our choices. The only difference is that I got to write the ending.